In this webinar, we are going to look at a step-by-step guide to score 700 plus on the GMAT. So how should you go about preparing yourself for the test? What are the important factors that you should take into account? And all those things are going to be discussed in this webinar. Okay, so before I proceed any further, I would want to make sure that all of you can hear me loud and clear. So please respond to this poll and let me know if you can hear my voice loud and clear. Okay, so please respond to this poll. I'll just wait for a few more responses to come in. It's very important to know whether my voice is clearly audible to you. Okay, so please respond to this poll. Okay, so thank you so much for the responses. I see that everyone can hear me. That's great. So let me introduce myself. I am Piyush and I'm going to be your main host today. I have around 8 years of experience of mentoring thousands of students for various management and test tests. And I have myself written the GMAT and I scored a 740 in the first attempt. Okay, so I have had a huge experience of speaking to students from various backgrounds, students who were really good, students who were average, who were weak in quant or verbal. And I have had experience over the years of helping each one of them to reach their target scores. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about my experiences, and I'm going to tell you what are the key things that you should take into account to make sure that you get the maximum out of the time that you're going to spend for your preparation. Okay, so that's about me. So before we begin the webinar, let me tell you very quickly about how have we structured the complete webinar. Okay, so like most of our webinars, this webinar is also going to have 3 sections. First of all, we'll start with a very quick introduction about who we are as a company, what is GMAT Viz and what do we do. It'll take around 10 minutes on that. We'll spend around 10 minutes on that. And then we will move to section 2, which is the main part of the webinar, where we are going to spend most of our time, roughly 80 minutes I have written. It can be anywhere between 1 to 1.5 hours. So depending on how the discussion goes. And I would request all of you to participate and ask any questions that you may have at any point of time. Remember, this is more of a consulting session where I want to help you work on the best practices and make sure that you reach your target score. So be as interactive as possible. Feel free to ask your questions. So I expect the second part of the webinar to be around 80 to 90 minutes long. And thereon, we will open the session for the third part where we will do a open-ended Q&A. When I say open-ended Q&A, how is it different from the questions that you're going to ask in the second section? In the second section, I'm going to mostly talk about answer queries which are around the topic of the webinar, which is how to prepare for GMAT. In the third section, I'm open to answering some other queries which may be related to your admissions process and any other things which might be troubling you or you want an answer on. Okay, so this is how the webinar is structured altogether. So let me get started with who we are. Okay, so we are a group of mentors who have counseled and taught thousands of students over the last decade with some of the most renowned brands in the industry, most renowned education brands and test prep companies in the industry. Now, when we were interacting with students, like we have had a lot of experiences around their pain points. We kind of identified some of the key problems that students face. Okay, but before I talk about those problems, I would like to hear from you in the chat over here that what are the problems that you are facing as a student when you have just started your GMAT preparation. Okay, and feel free to share whatever issues that you face. You can probably talk about the top 2 or top 3 things that you feel are creating trouble for you or something which is not really clear to you about your preparation. What are the biggest pains that you have when you're preparing for the GMAT? So feel free to share with me in the chat. I would like to see what are the problems that you are facing. And then I'll talk about the problems that we saw, but the main problems and the main reasons that we saw. Okay, so please feel free to respond on the chat. I'll wait for a couple of minutes to see your responses, guys. And I'm sure we have a great batch of students. We have a good number of students and I expect a lot of responses from you. Good. So I have the first comment. Abdul says there is no clear structure in how I am going about my planning or studies. Very good point, Abdul. And it's one of the biggest problems that, and in fact, I will probably keep it as the number one problem that most of the students face. Students do not know what is the right method or right order in which they should do, or the learning is not structured at all. Okay, I have another comment from Rhythm. Rhythm says the main problem is verbal for me. All right, so again, I would actually say that the some people find verbal troublesome, some people find quant troublesome, but the key reason behind that is they don't know why they are weak in that particular area. Once you know the root cause of the problem, I'm sure the solving the problem is not that big a issue altogether. Okay, so I have some more questions. If procrastination is a problem, Gaurav says I'm not able to perform under time pressure. Attention span for verbal section and time issue for quant. Okay, good. Rishikant says varied opinion on materials to follow. Good. That's another problem. Like there's too many. There are too many things to choose from. What do I do? Rohit says inconsistency. Again, I am assuming, Rohit, you are a working professional, and so is Sunant. So that's a big problem with working professionals. How do you manage and make sure that you are studying consistently, right? So that is another issue. Okay, so good, really good points, and I feel that these are some of the biggest problems that students face, and I'm going to summarize these points in three common areas basically that we also notice. The first problem that we found with students was they have to plan their studies themselves, as one of you were talking about, unstructured preparation or inconsistent preparation or a procrastination. The core reason behind that is you have to plan your studies yourself. Okay, you don't know what is to be studied, in what order it is to be studied, when it is to be studied, what is the plan that I should follow. Even if you create a plan, that plan does not change over a period of time, and you have to monitor your progress yourself. So all those things becomes troublesome. So planning the studies, finding the right courses, all these things are definitely tricky. The second problem that we found, and as some of you were talking about it as well, is analyzing your strengths and weaknesses. Okay, you might know that you are weak in verbal, but why is that you're weak in verbal? Okay, what is the core reason behind it? And how can you overcome that? That analysis of strengths and weaknesses is not done really well for students. And related problem to this is individual attention. Students do not generally get individual attention. Even if they go to coaching institutes, they basically focus on just the brightest students of the batch who will get them a good score, and everyone is not getting individual attention. So the onus is onto you to go and reach out to the teachers. And if you are an average student or a below average student, sometimes you might be too shy to reach out to them. So all of these problems combined actually create a lot of issues for students who are preparing for the test. And we saw that these problems are not really solved completely by any of the test prep industry companies which are basically there right now. What we found was some of them are trying to solve the problem. For example, some of them provide you with a study plan. Like they might as well give you a study plan which is a 1 month or a 3 month plan. But the problem with the plan is it's not personalized to you. Okay, so the plan is a general plan, it's a static plan. It's like one size fits all kind of a thing. And biggest problem is the plan does not adapt as you learn. Okay, so if you have more time in a particular week to study, then another week compared to another week, it does not take that into account. I have an interesting question with me. Pishak is saying, how about GMAT club study plans? Okay, so good, Pishak, good point. See, there are study plans available, but the problem is the plans are not really personalized. They are generic plans. Everyone has to follow the same thing. I understand that there are certain guidelines, the best practices that work for everyone, but again, for a working professional, it is very important that the plan adapts every week. Imagine a scenario where all you had to do was enter the time that was available with you in current week, and you get everything right in front of you. Okay, like, okay, in this week, you have to do this video. After that, you have to solve this 5 questions. You have to then solve this 10 questions. And it is not just telling you you have to solve the questions. It is giving you those questions as well. And based on your performance in those questions, they actually adapt the plan accordingly. They add up new material. New material gets added according to that. Okay, so there could be verbal and quant intensive plans. Again, I'm not saying that those plans are not helpful. All I'm trying to say is the plans do not adapt as you learn. So the learning could be much more effective if the plans are more personalized. The second thing that we found was some companies do share statistics around their strengths and weaknesses, but this insightful is whether you are strong in a particular area or a weak in a particular area. For example, you might be strong in SC, or they might even tell you that you are strong in modifiers, but you are weak in parallelism. But why is that you are weak in parallelism? Okay, so that is something which they don't tell you. So that is another problem. And the only way to get personal and individual attention is to go for private tutoring, which tends to be very costly for most of the people. Okay, so these are some of the things which current solutions are trying to solve, but they're not able to solve. So Pishak, I'm going to come to your question, answer your question about how very soon, so don't worry about it. But let's move in the flow, and I'll definitely take up that point as well. Okay, so that is when the idea of GMAT whiz came up, because we believed that this all these problems that we see over here can be easily solved by leveraging the power of technology. And that's why GMAT came into picture by creating world's only truly personalized course. Again, personalized is a keyword which a lot of people use, and it has been overused in the industry, but it's very critical for us. We focus on truly personalizing your learning by providing a personalized course. So what we basically do is at GMAT we provide you with a personalized study plan the moment you on board on our platform. And the best part about this plan is it keeps on adapting every single week by serving you real-time improvement modules as you're learning. And if you take up the complete package that we offer, you get access to a dedicated mentor who will look at your progress every 10 to 15 days. He's a guide who has taken the GMAT himself, has scored more than 700 himself, and you will be taken through the whole process with the mentor. So the mentor will tell you, okay, if you're not doing well, why is that you're not doing well, and what you should do to make sure that you do well. So these are some key pillars that we believe on, and we have tried to use technology to the best effect to achieve these things. Again, I'm not going to get into the details of it right now, but our numbers speak for ourselves. Okay, the quality that we offer. So right now, if you look at the average score improvement based on the verified reviews on GMAT Club, you'll find that GMAT Viz has a whopping 106 points average score improvement when compared to the other test prep companies having around 70 points, 80 points, or 90 points of improvement only. Okay, so that is the power of technology, that is the power of guided learning that we offer at GMAT Viz. Okay, again, the seminar is this part is not about this webinar is not about GMAT Viz alone. It's about how you can study for the GMAT. So we are going to move to that part now. Here's a overview of what we are going to discuss in this webinar. Okay, I have an interesting question in the Q&A. I'm just quickly going to answer that. Pishak is asking, why do we need a mentor if technology can do that? Okay, so Pishak, again, a very interesting question. I believe that technology is capable of doing a lot of things, but in the ideal world, technology is something which empowers human beings to take the right decisions. So we add on a mentor on top of technology to make sure that you get the best advices possible. Even if technology is missing something, then basically you get to basically the mentors can basically talk about those parts. Okay, so I'm getting a lot of questions in the poll, so please hold on to these questions which are specific to GMAT Viz right now, because I'm going to take them up in the Q&A part later on. So let me please move on to the main part of the webinar, where I'm going to now focus on the strategy to score 700 plus and how you should go about your preparation altogether. Okay, so I'm going to answer all your questions, Rohit, Pishak, Teni. I'm going to answer those questions. Please hold on to them for the time being. All right, so how do you basically go about your preparation? So I'm going to talk about 4 simple steps in which you should plan to prepare for the GMAT. Okay, the first step is planning. You need to understand how to break down your target scores into quant and verbal. You need to plan the whole process in the right way. Okay, then you need to execute by learning the concepts and the applications properly, and then you need to assess your performance in 2 phases, by learning and while fine tuning. And finally, you should optimize your weak areas. Okay, so this is just an overview of what we are going to discuss in the webinar. I'm going to talk about each of these points in detail now. Okay, so I'm going to talk about each of these points in detail. So let's get started. Okay, so what about planning? Now, how do you create a study plan? What are the main elements of the right study plan? Okay, so the first and the foremost thing which is important to create the right study plan is to ensure that you focus on your strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so it's very, very critical for you to create a plan that focuses on your strengths and weaknesses. At the same time, it should also take into account the time which is available with you. It should also take into account the right sequence of learning, and it should also take into account the right amount of content that you should study. Okay, so I'm going to take up these points and I'm going to help you understand how you can go about creating a plan for yourself. All right, so let's get started with the first part. Like, how do you identify your target score and break it down into specific targets based on your strengths and weaknesses? So there are two scenarios which are possible. One scenario is you are already good in one section out of the two sections which are quant and verbal. You're already good in one of them. Okay, so if you're very good in one of them, your goal should be to maximize your score in that area. Okay, if you're equally good in both the sections, then you should try to balance the target score that you have in the two sections. Okay, so this is an overview. Let me explain with the help of a simple example. So let's say your target score is 720. Okay, so how should you break it down into the quant and verbal target scores? So that is something that I'm going to tell you now. I'm just taking 720 as an example, which is a good enough target for most of the people. So let's say you're good in one section and that section is quant. So if you're good in quant, you should ideally try to target around a 50 in quant and a 38 in verbal. That's the best possible target for you. If you're good in verbal, you should try to maximize your score in verbal, maybe push it to a 43, and you should try to get around 46 in quant. Again, this is a scenario where you're just in one section. You are probably very weak in the other one. Now, what if you are having like you're good in both the sections? Then what should you do? Then you should try to balance the target in quant and verbal. Your target quant score should be around 48 and your target verbal score should be around 40. Okay, so basically what you need to do is you need to make sure that you are identifying the right target scores. Okay, you need to make sure that you're identifying the right target scores for yourself. Now, once you have identified the right target score, it becomes very important that you identify the right sequence of learning as well. Because I have seen students preparing for various sections in a random order. In fact, someone also told me that I prepare in a very unstructured way. Okay, so what happens sometimes is I see students preparing for RC, CR, and SC on alternate days of the week. Okay, so that is something which I have seen with a good number of students, and in the end I feel that they did not do enough research, they did not have a good understanding of the idea, and that's why they couldn't follow the right sequence, and that impacted their overall performance. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what should be the right sequence for verbal, but even before that we need to understand what is that is actually tested in verbal. Okay, I have a question in the Q&A pod. I have actually two questions. I have a question from Pishak and I have a question from AP. Pishak, I have deleted your comment because it was not really relevant for the discussion that we are having. I'm going to answer your question in the Q&A part of the webinar. Don't worry about that. AP, why verbal is considered low in all three cases? I believe that you are comparing the verbal scores with the quant scores. They are not really comparable. Like it's not a comparison between two identical things. For example, a quant 50 is not same as a verbal 50. A quant 50 is very similar to a verbal 40 kind of a thing, is how I would put it. So it's not low in all three cases. It's actually, if you look at the good in verbal case, verbal 43 is probably a very, very high score. Okay, so I hope that answers your question, AP. So for verbal, what should be the right sequence? So let's look at the skills that are tested. So the first skill which is tested in verbal is basically the comprehension skills. Okay, you need to make sure that you understand each and every part of a sentence clearly. Okay, so that is something which is very important to learn. So GMAT wants future managers to be very clear in their communication, written as well as spoken. So comprehension skills is the first skill which is tested on the GMAT. The second skill that is tested is your analytical reasoning. How can you reason with the information which is provided? Whether can you identify the gaps that exist between in the information? What are the flaws? What are the possible assumptions? And all those things are actually tested as a part of your analytical reasoning skills in verbal. The third skill which is tested is basically focusing on the main point, focusing on the purpose of something which has been written. Okay, understanding what is the crux of it, because you will be solving a lot of case studies during your MBA days. So they want to understand and get students who can actually focus on the main point when there is so much of information which is provided. Okay, so these are the three skills which are tested. Now that we understand the skills, let's map them to the various modules in verbal. So there are three modules in verbal, all of us know about it. SC, sentence correction, critical reasoning, and reading comprehension. Now, sentence correction only tests your comprehension skills, because over there, you have to just make sure that every sentence is logical, clear, which is unambiguous, and concise. Okay, so you have to make sure that the meaning of the sentence is clear to everyone who reads it. Now, I understand a lot of you might think that SC is also about grammar, but the good thing with GMAT grammar is all of it is meaning driven. The most important concepts that are tested are modifiers, parallelism, comparisons, and tenses. All those things are meaning based. So if you learn the right approach, if you learn the right logic behind those rules, SC becomes very meaning driven for you. Okay, so SC is just testing you on one skill, which is comprehension skill. On the other hand, CR tests you on two skills. It tests your comprehension skills, because obviously if you have to make sense of an argument, you have to make sense of individual sentences as well. Okay, and then you have to relate multiple sentences to identify how is the information flowing from one sentence to another, and what are the gaps that exist between the information that is flowing. Okay, so that is something which is very critical for CR as well. Okay, and finally, RC tests you on all three skills. You have to understand individual sentences. You have to understand the flow of the argument, like all the various paragraphs, how the information is linked to each other. And you also have to understand and focus on the main point. Okay, so now let me ask you a question. So considering that information that I have provided to you, what do you think should be the right order of learning? Okay, what do you think should be the right order of learning? Okay, let me get you a poll over here, and just give me a second, guys. I'm going to get you a poll. So please respond to this poll and tell me, according to you, what is the right order in which you should learn. So it will just take me 1 more minute to get you the poll over here. So just a second, guys. So here is the poll for you. So tell me, based on this information that I just provided you, what should be the right order in which you should learn verbal? Okay, and I'll wait for 15 seconds more for your responses. I see that most of you are picking the right order, which is a really good thing. I'm hoping you are able to make sense out of why that is the right order as well, based on the information that I just provided. So let me end the poll now, and here are the results in front of you. So really good job, guys. That's actually the best order, because if you do SC, then do CR, and then do RC, what you're basically doing is you're focusing on just developing one skill at a time. Okay, imagine, I see some people mentioning that they should do RC first and then SC and then CR. Imagine that if you start doing that, and if you are not a very good reader and you don't have solid comprehension skills, what will happen? You will struggle with most of the RCs, because you're not able to get the meaning of individual sentences clearly. Okay, I'm not saying that you won't get the meaning at all. Don't confuse that with getting the meaning clearly, because on GMAT getting the exact meaning is very, very important. So if you're doing RC first and then doing SC and CR, you are probably trying to develop all three skills at once. Okay, so it is very, very critical for you to focus on this order. Okay, so CR is critical reasoning, Pedro, RC is reading comprehension, and SC is sentence correction. So you should first do sentence correction, then do critical reasoning, and in the end you should follow up with reading comprehension. That is the right order for learning. Now if you learn in this order, what are the benefits that you're going to get? Number one, you are going to be much more effective in the subsequent modules. You are going to learn much more faster. You don't have to come back to certain things again and again. Your time to prepare is going to be less. Third thing, your accuracy is going to be much more higher as you progress. Okay, so there are some of the best benefits that you can get if you focus on the right sequence for learning. Okay, so this is the order for verbal. So let me ask you a very quick question before I move on. Is the order and reasoning clear to all of you? Quick yes, no, guys. I just want to make sure that every one of you is clear with this sequence of studying. Quick yes, no, guys. Is the sequence clear to all of you? Why am I asking you to work on the sequence? Okay, good. I have a good number of responses and I see that everyone is clear with that. Great. So let's move on now to Quant. Okay, for what should be the sequence of Quant? And let me tell you this. Why is this important? Because when you're creating a study plan, if you don't know what is the right sequence, you won't be able to create the study plan yourself. Okay, so for Quant, what the sequence has to be done in a different way. Generally, most of the people, what they do is they ask you to do number properties first, or maybe algebra first. Okay, so number properties and algebra are generally the first two things that they ask you to do. Then they ask you to do the word problems and geometry. So they ask you to go module wise in Quant as well. Okay, just like verbal, they might as well tell you to do things module wise in Quant. But the problem with Quant is, in Quant the modules are much more interrelated. Like it's not like that like verbal where you do SC, so there's only one skill which you're learning there and you bring that skill to CR. They are intermixed actually in the modules are intermixed in Quant. For example, you can never prime factorize and deal with powers if you do not know anything about exponents. So prime numbers is a concept which is covered in number properties, whereas exponents is a concept which is covered in algebra. So to do well in number properties, you will need to have some understanding of the algebraic concepts. Similarly, you cannot solve divisibility equations unless you are clear about linear, simultaneous, and special equations. And you cannot solve square root and quadratic equations that you come across in statistics. So basically, it is very, very important for you to make sure that you learn the concepts in the right order. Here, it is not about the modules. It is more about the individual concepts and learning them in the right order. So you cannot do these things in module-wise manner. Okay, so what is important here is that if you have to ace NP, you have to have the basic understanding of some other essential topics. So you have to focus topic wise, and that is something which none of the test prep industries point out, or it is basically left to students to figure out, and students actually struggle in doing that. So what is the right order for Quant? So we believe that you should do all the basic topics first. For example, you should first start with number classification. Understand what are the various type of numbers. Okay, what are the various type of integers, decimals, fractions, estimation, rounding. Do those basic things first. Then you should move to linear equations. Try understand how to solve, and in fact, even before solving, frame linear equations. Okay, learn unitary method, learn about even odd integers, and so on. So you have to do the basic concepts across the different modules first. Now, once you are done with that, then you should move to the intermediate topics. Again, you're not doing it module wise, you're doing all modules at once, but you're focusing more on the topic wise order. So for intermediate topics, you should do units digit in linear inequality circles, and so on. So you have to follow the intermediate topics after that, and then in the end you should go for advanced topics like functions, coordinate geometry, probability, and so on. So this is the right sequence of learning for quant. Okay, so make sure that you are following the right sequence for quant as well. Okay, now all this is true for students who have just started their preparation, but what about someone who has already prepared? Okay, so if you have, and let me actually ask this question. So since when are you preparing for the GMAT? Let me click on start this poll. So I have started a poll. I would like to understand, since how long have you been preparing for the GMAT? So accordingly I can focus on these on this section. Okay, so I've got some responses. I would request everyone to respond to this poll. Since how long have you been preparing for the GMAT? Just give me a fair estimate so that I can devote the right amount of time on this area. All right, so I have a good number of responses, and they seem to be settling down in a certain way. All right, so let me end the poll now. So you can see the results. I see that around 70% of you have been preparing for less than 1 month, or you are yet to start their preparation. So most of you fall in the category that I discussed first. So if you are in this category, you need to follow the sequence which I told you. For verbal, SC followed by CR followed by RC. For quant, it has to be done topic wise. Now, if a question is going on in your mind, how do I identify the topic wise order for quant? I'm going to share that with you just in a moment. Don't worry about that. For those of you, there are around 30% students who have either prepared for 2 months or 3 months or maybe more than 6 months as well. For them, I'm going to tell you the right sequence of studying right now. Okay, so if you have already prepared, then what you should do is you should take up a module wise test. Okay, for example, I'm going to take an example for verbal right now. So you should take up a module wise test, and for example, let's say you take a test in SC with 15 to 20 questions. So take a test in CR with 15 to 20 questions, and similarly for RC. And then what you should do is you should divide those modules into strong and weak areas. Okay, so strong area would be a module where you are getting anything above 70%. Okay, and a weak area will be where you are getting anything less than 70%. Okay, so first divide them into two areas, strong and weak, and then accordingly you have to divide the sequence. So let me take a use case. So let's say a student takes a module-wise test in all three modules of verbal, and his scores are like these: 90% in SC, 60% in CR, and 40% in RC. So what should the student do first? So the student should work on his weak areas first, and followed by his strong areas. So right now for this student, the weak areas would be CR and RC, and the strong area would be SC. So SC should be done at the end. Okay, that is pretty much clear. What about CR and RC? Now, since the scores are very, very close to each other, even in CR he is still at a 60% level, I would strongly recommend that he should do CR first, followed by RC, and then do SC in the end. Okay, I'm not asking him to do RC first and then CR, and the reason is same. Okay, your understanding of CR is going to help you in RC as well. Okay, so it's important that you follow this particular order. So similarly, you can basically devise an order for quant as well. Obviously, in quant, it gets a little more complicated because you have to make sure that you are taking care of the topics as well. Okay, so I have a question from Paras. Paras saying, any suggestions from where to take the test? So Paras, you can, if you are registered on the GMAT Quiz portal, there is a section called Quizzard. We have our quizzing platform in the menu. You can take a quiz from there. You can take a 15-question quiz for RCCR and SC. Even if you are a free trial user, you will be able to take a one test at least from each of these modules. Okay, so you can take it from there, or you can also take up an official mock. From there you can see your accuracies in SC, CR and RC if you want. Okay, another question from Rohit: how much one should focus on mock test frequency till date exam, when to do it weekly or daily? So Rohit, mocks should come at the second or third last stage. Okay, I'm going to talk about mocks. Don't worry about it. I don't want to get to that right away because mocks comes later. Right now, we are focusing on the planning part. So I'm going to talk about the mocks. Don't worry about it. So this is the right order for someone who has already prepared for some time. Okay, I hope this is clear to all of you. Let me quickly ask a question. Yes, no, guys. Quick yes, no, so that I know that this sequence is clear to all of you. Quick yes, no here. Just want to make sure that all of you are with me on this. Okay, great. So I see that everyone is clear with that. So good. So once you understand all of it, then you are in a much better position to create a study plan for yourself. Now, when you're creating a study plan, it is very important that you focus on identifying clear targets and deadlines for yourself. Because unless you have clear targets and deadlines, you will you will keep on procrastinating, and it is very easy for you to fall off the track. Okay, so it's very important to have clear targets and deadlines. And as I mentioned, you have to focus on these four factors, and depending on these four factors, your prep time can be anywhere between 100 to 350 hours. Now, if you want to create a study plan for yourself without putting in so much effort by yourself, there's a very simple method of doing that. What you can do is you can go to the website, our website gmatwest.com, and from there you basically can actually, after registration, you can get a detailed and personalized study plan even if you are a free trial user. Okay, so I'm going to show you a screenshot of how the study plan looks right now. And this is something which we offer the free trial users as well. So the platform will automatically identify all those parameters for you, and it will give you this kind of a study plan where you will have clear levels. There will be multiple levels of learning. All of it is arranged in the right order according to your scores. So sentence correction, critical reasoning, reading comprehension, foundation, intermediate, advanced, you can see on your screen, and everything has a clear cut deadline against it. And not just deadlines, you also get to know what is that you have to complete in the current week. Okay, it is very clearly shown to you, and these levels are further divided into units, and you will have clear cut deadlines for every single unit. Okay, for example, in sentence correction, there are these 3 units in which you learn, and you will have clear cut deadlines for the sentence correction part. So if you are a free trial user, you will have this first level as free trial, where you can see where you can actually try out some of the lessons and the quizzes that we have to offer. So the free trial part you can access completely. You can see that the other portions like sentence correction, critical reasoning are locked for you. But the good thing is, even if they are locked, you can still get a deadline on which you should work. And if you expand any of the topics, even in the logged files, you will be able to see that what do you have to study, what are the topics that you have to study in each of them. Okay, so you have to make sure that you go through it clearly. You understand, if you want to understand what is the right order of learning for quant, you can see that these are the 4 units that you should do. And if you click on the drop down arrow, you will be able to also find out what are the topics that are inside it. Okay, and the best part is the plan adapts every week. So I'm just showing you a scenario where if I change the time available per week, it will automatically adjust the deadlines, it will automatically adjust the plan for the current week, and so on. So it's a very adaptive plan, and every week it is going to ask you for the time which is available with you, and it's going to adapt in real time, and also going to create improvement modules in the real time on the go for you. Okay, so if you want to have a study plan for you, you can actually register for a free trial of GMAT Viz platform and get a study plan. Okay, so this is about the study plan. Now what next? Once you have the study plan with you, it is important to move on to the next stage, which is the execution stage. Now, before I talk about execution, I'm going to tell you something which is very important about the GMAT algorithm, because unless you understand this aspect of the GMAT algorithm, you will miss a very critical part of execution, that is called application. And I have seen a lot of students struggling because of which. So to help you understand the importance of application, I'm going to share with you how the GMAT algorithm works. Okay, so first of all, I'll show you a very simple example. to help you understand how the adaptive algorithm works. And let me in fact ask a very quick question. How many of you are aware of how the adaptive algorithm works? Quick yes no guys. How many of you are aware of it? How many of you are aware of how the adaptive GMAT adaptive algorithm works? Okay, I see that 100% of you are aware of it. Okay, some people just voted no, I'm not aware of the GMAT adaptive algorithm. All right, suddenly it's 50-50 now. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, it's going more in favor of no. Okay, I've just ended the poll. So I can see that it's a 50-50 split. Like some of you are aware, some of you are not aware. But let me take you through the whole process and then I'll ask you this same question again, that after going through all this, how aware were you earlier? Okay, so I'll ask that and I'll see that did I add some extra value to your understanding of the algorithm. So first of all, for those of you who are not at all aware about it, I'm going to take a simple use case. So for every student who takes the test starts around the medium difficulty level. So let's say you get the first question, which is from a medium difficulty level, and obviously it has a certain weightage attached to it. So over here, I have assumed that a medium question has 3 points. So let's say you as a student get the first question right. So what the algorithm will do is it will adapt the difficulty level and it understands that you're capable of solving the easy ones, medium ones. So it will give you a medium hard question as the next question. Let's say you get this one right as well. So the next question that you get is a hard one. Let's say you get this one right as well. So probably the difficulty level stays at the same level, but you get the fourth question wrong. So the difficulty level dropped and you get the fifth question wrong as well. Okay. So can you tell me how many points did this student score? Okay. How many points did this student score? He got 3 questions out of 5 right. You can look at the points which are there on the screen. And can you tell me quickly how many points did this student score by getting the questions right? Quickly in the chat part, how many points do you think this student scored? Okay, Rishikant says 12. Good. Antonia also says 12. Good. Good work, guys. Good work. Yeah, so it's very simple. If you have different difficult weights attached to individual questions, so this guy got a question of medium, medium hard, and hard difficulty level right. So he got a total of 12 points. Okay, so that's what his score is. His accuracy is 60%. Let's now take another use case. Let's take a second student. He also starts with a medium difficulty question like any other student, and he gets this one wrong. So the algorithm believes that the student does not have a capability of answering a medium question. So the algorithm reduces the difficulty level to easy medium. He gets that one wrong too. He gets an easy question next, which he gets right because he has the capability of getting it right. Then he gets an easy medium question, and let's assume that he gets it right as well. And finally, he is given a medium question, which he gets right too. Now, if you look at the score of this student just scored 6 points. Okay, he got an easy, medium, and medium question correct. But if you look at the accuracy of this student's accuracy is also 60%. So both students have exactly the same accuracy numbers. But look at the difference in the number of points that they scored. One student has gotten 12 points while the other student has just got 6 points. So the first student has actually scored twice of the second student. Okay, and that's how the algorithm works. So the algorithm is not really dependent on accuracy. It is dependent on which questions you get right, your skill level. Okay, so this is a very simple example that I took. GMAT is not adaptive after every question. It doesn't adapt after every question. They don't share that with us, but analyzing various ESRs, we have come to the conclusion that it adapts after a block of 2 or 3 questions, or maybe 4 questions. But it was a very simple example that I wanted to share with you. So let us now take an actual GMAT scenario. Okay, so I'm going to I'm sharing the ESR snapshot of one of the students' verbal section. I'm just taking the verbal section for the time being. So what this ESR snapshot tells you is that this student has scored a verbal 30, which is around 58 percentile. So percentile wise, it is 58 percentile. Okay, his verbal score was 30. Now, what this bar chart tells you is what is his accuracy in the 4 quarters. So there are the test is divided into 4 quarters. The first quarter has 8 questions, the second quarter has 7 questions, the third quarter also has 7 questions, and the last quarter has 8 questions. So total there are 30 scored questions out of the 36 questions which are there in verbal. Okay, there are 6 unscored questions as well. Okay, so out of this 30 scored questions, this is how the GMAT divides the various quarters into, and this chart tells the students' accuracies in each of these quarters. So what do we get to know from this? What we get to know from this is, in the first quarter, the student made 4 mistakes. In the second quarter, the student made just 1 mistake. In the third quarter, the student did not make any mistakes. And in the last quarter, the student made 3 mistakes. Okay, so basically, the total mistakes made by the students overall was 8. Okay, so try to register this fact in your mind. So by making 8 mistakes, the student got a score of 30 in verbal. All right, now let me bring you the next screen. I'm going to bring another use case in front of you. This is the left side is the same ESR snapshot that we saw. On the right, I'm introducing a new snapshot, okay, of another student. Okay, and what I'm going to tell you is, I'm going to tell you how many mistakes he did in each of the quarters. So this student made 2 mistakes in the first quarter, 2 in the second quarter, and 3 in the last quarter. So all in all, he made 7 mistakes. What I want you to now do is tell me what could be his verbal score. And let me bring you a poll for this one. So I have a poll over here. So take your time if you want to, and tell me what could be the verbal score of the student on the right side. Okay, he made 7 mistakes. The first student made 8 mistakes. There's just difference of 1 single mistake, 1 extra mistake that the second student has made. I want to hear from you. Take your time if you want to. As this is, I know it's slightly complex. So take your time and let me know what do you think is the score of the second student in verbal. The poll is live. You can mention your answers in the poll. And if you want to elaborate on it, you can always feel free to write in the chat as well. Like if you have any special reason behind what you are voting and why you are voting it. So in the meantime, you respond to the poll. I take up a question from the Q&A part. Harshit is saying, if the test starts at a medium level, then how come people get 800 out of 800? First of all, 800 out of 800 is a very rare scenario. I guess only 2 or 3 people get that in a complete year. But again, that it doesn't matter where the test starts from. It matters where it ends, or how you do during the whole journey. Okay, so if you are really a 800 level kind of a student, your difficulty level will shoot up really, really quickly. Okay, and I'm going to talk about that, Harshit, in a bit. Okay, so please hold on to that thought. Okay, so I have a good number of responses in the poll, so I'm gonna end the poll in another 5 seconds. If you want to put in your responses, feel free to do that. Okay, good. So let me end the poll now. So you can see the results of the poll. Most of you have voted for the score range of 34 to 35. And honestly speaking, if I was not aware of the GMAT algorithm, probably I would have marked that as the possible answer as well. Good number of you believe that it could be around 33, 36, 37, and some of you believe it can be as low as 31 to 33, or it can be as high as 38 and 39. And the least popular choice is, sadly, or whatever I say, it is the right answer as well. Okay, the score of the second student is 41. Okay, the second student scored a whopping 41 on the test. Okay, so let me ask you another question now. Do you think the GMAT algorithm is harsh? Just 1 extra mistake or 1 less mistake, however you take it, and look at the difference in the verbal scores. And if you're not able to relate with the difference, let me give you the percentile scores. The first student scored a 58 percentile. The second student scored a 93 percentile, and just 1 less mistake. Okay. Do you think the GMAT algorithm is harsh? Quick yes, no. Do you think the algorithm is harsh over here? Just 1 extra mistake and you are penalizing the student so heavily. Okay. Please respond in the poll. I'll be happy to see your responses. And in the meantime, let me tell you, the student on the right is me. This is ESR snapshot of my personal attempt. So I made 7 mistakes and I got a 41 on verbal. All right, so I have a good number of responses in the poll. Let me end it. Okay, so most of you believe that GMAT is being harsh, but let me tell you guys, GMAT is not at all harsh in this case. GMAT is probably one of the most standardized tests that one can get their hands on. Okay, I see a lot of comments from you, Sunan, Aditya, Sunan. You're not able to even believe that difference, right? But this is actually true, and I'm going to share why did this happen, because obviously showing data is one thing, but understanding why it happened and dissecting it and drawing the right inferences is what differentiates a successful student from an unsuccessful one. So let us understand why this happened. So if you look at overall, the biggest mistake that the first student did was he got a low accuracy in the first quarter itself. And we saw some time back what happens if you get the initial questions wrong. The algorithm takes ages to put you back on the right track. Okay, so it's a crime to get a low accuracy in the initial questions. And let me share that with the help of this graph. Okay, so good point, Pooja. It's about the level of difficulty and not accuracy. Very good point. And that's what I'm going to show you here. So if you look at the average accuracy of the first student in the first quarter, you will see that his average accuracy was around low medium, even in the first quarter as well as the second quarter. The reason why it remained at the same level and it did not go up is because the student did not do well on the first quarter. He got 4 questions wrong out of 8. Okay, so his difficulty level did not increase. And even if he did well on the second quarter, he got a pretty good accuracy because he was getting lower difficulty questions right. His score did not go that up basically. Okay, so if you look at the second student on the other hand, in the second quarter, the difficulty level of the questions that the second student was getting was much more higher. And if you see the second student, the mistakes that the second student, which in this case is me, I made was some silly mistakes. I made some of the mistakes in the easiest questions, whereas the other student was making the hard questions wrong. The moment the algorithm tried to serve him a hard question, he was making an error there, and that's where the algorithm stopped. It started believing that this first student does not have the skill of solving the hard questions, so it kept on serving medium questions to him. You can see the difficulty level chart for yourself, and if I bring those two things side by side, you can see the kind of difference that exists between these two students. It's a huge difference between the difficulty level. Okay, and that's what tells GMAT that the second student is much more skilled than the first student, and that's why the scores are different. Even in the third quarter, you can see the difficulty level was very, very different. Okay, so GMAT is not harsh, guys. It is one of the most standardized tests. It is one of the best tests because of the adaptive algorithm that it has. Now, let me ask you this question. So, understanding the algorithm now, tell me, did you have a clear-cut understanding of the algorithm before this discussion? Quick yes, no. Okay. What do you believe now? Did you have a clear understanding of the algorithm before the discussion that we had? Don't take the discussion into account. Okay. Before the discussion, did you have a good understanding of the algorithm? Do you think so? Or if your understanding was you understood this, you had a good idea about what I just said even before the session. Okay. Please select yes. If you got to learn something new or something altogether different about the algorithm today, please select no. Okay. Good. I have some good number of responses. Let me end the poll. So now I can see that almost 3/4 of the batch says that yeah, my understanding of the algorithm has improved. And the reason I asked this question was I also was not really aware of how the algorithm works. But once I got to know it, I utilized it to my benefit a lot. Okay, and that's what I want you guys to do as well. So it is very important for on GMAT to focus on skill and not on accuracy. So what is skill? Skill is basically the ability to get a question of any difficulty level correct. It doesn't really matter like how many questions you are getting right. Obviously it will play a role, but it is more important to focus on the difficulty levels as well. You should have the capability of solving the hard questions correctly, consistently. Okay, I had another example which I have taken off from the slide. There was a case when a student made 9 mistakes and his verbal score was just 21. Okay, I did not show you that use case because I wanted to just make sure that the session is not too lengthy. So what I meant to say is it's not about the accuracy, it's more about the skill. Okay, so all that you have to do in order to get a 700 plus score is, first thing, you need to make the algorithm serve you hard questions. Okay, that's the first thing. Unless you get hard questions, you can't do well. Now, how do you get hard questions? You have to have a high accuracy on easy and medium questions. Okay, and in a bit you are going to understand why am I talking about all this. See, having a high accuracy on easy and medium questions requires you to be good and sound conceptually. If you have a sound understanding of the concepts, you will be able to do well on the easy and medium questions. You will be able to do well, and you will get hard questions. But the story doesn't end there. Then you have to get this hard questions right. Okay, the reason I got a V41 was not just that I got a hard question on the test, it was more that when I got hard questions, I got all of them correct in my third quarter. Okay, so that is the biggest thing which will differentiate your score, because if you don't get the hard questions right, you will get stuck around that 600 650 mark, and you won't be able to push your score beyond 700. Now, what do you need to get the hard questions right? You need to learn the right skills, and you need to learn how to apply them. Okay, so think of it this way. To do the first part, you need to be good at concepts. To do the second part, you need to have the right strategy or application skills to nail the hard questions, because in most of the hard questions, if you do not follow the right strategy, you will get stuck with too close choices and you will end up marking the wrong one. Okay, so that's something which is very, very critical, and that brings us to the execution stage. So what is that is important in the execution stage? Now that we understand the algorithm, we need to understand that if you want to build the right skills, you have to focus on concept as well as application. Okay, but this is easier said than done. 90% of the students that I speak with, I mostly speak to around 3 to 4 students every single day. 90% of the students that I speak with focus mainly on concepts. They will read tons of books, they will go through tons of posts to be good at concepts. They'll keep telling me that I know every single grammar rule that exists, I know all the formulas really well. But very, very, very few of them focus on the right approach for solving questions. I'm not saying they do not focus on approach, but the most important word there is the right approach of solving questions. Okay, and let me tell you how you should go about building the skills. So whenever you take up a single topic, okay, what do I mean by a topic? First of all, when I say topic, I don't mean to say SC, CR or RC. You have to break it down further. Okay, SC, CR and RC, or maybe number properties, word problems, are modules per my definition. Topic is the next thing in the hierarchy. So topic could be modifiers, subject verb tenses, it could be prime numbers, it could be statistics. All these are topics. Now, how should you learn a topic? We have talked about the modules, that you have to follow a certain structure. Okay, this is the way in which you should go about learning modules. But what about individual topics? So there are 3 stages of learning for every topic. The first stage is learning concepts. And let me tell you, most of you do this well. Okay, if you have spent a good number of you have spent more than 2 months on your prep, and if you have spent that much time, or maybe 1 month, you will be doing well on the concepts. That's not going to be an issue at all. That should be the first stage of your learning. The second stage, after you have learned the concepts, should be mastering a methodical approach. Again, focus on this part. I have not written learning a methodical approach. I am saying mastering a methodical approach. You have to imbibe that approach in your day-to-day question solving mechanism. Okay, you have to learn this as a separate stage. And then in the third stage, you should focus on practicing questions from that particular topic. If you follow these 3 stages for learning every topic, you will be able to score 700 plus on the test. Okay? But the biggest problem is most of the students jump directly from stage 1 to stage 3. Okay, they will read some concepts from a book and then directly bang on to the questions. Okay, go to GMAT Club, take up OG, start solving all the questions that they can get hold on for that particular topic. They miss the second stage. They do not learn how to apply the right concepts in the right order, in the right way on the questions. And unless you do that, you will keep on repeating the same mistakes. Again, you won't make mistakes in the easy and medium questions. I'm pretty sure about it. But you will keep on repeating the same mistakes without even knowing, without even realizing on the hard questions. And in the end, you will get stuck with the 600 to 650 zone. So it is very, very critical that you focus on learning every topic in these three stages. Okay. So what is this application all about? I've been talking about since a long time on application. I showed you the whole algorithm. I told you that to get a hard question right, you have to get the application skills there. Okay. And I see questions coming in as well. Bhuvneshwar is asking how to schedule to practice stage 2. Shweta is also asking the same thing. Like, what do you mean by methodical approach? Let me tell you that. Okay. I have all of those things covered. Don't worry about that. So what does right application mean? Let me give you an example. So let me ask you this question. How will you solve for x and y if this equation is given to you? Okay, and please respond in the chat here. How will you solve for x and y if these two linear equations are given to you? Take your time if you want to, and please mention your steps in short in the chat here. How will you solve for x and y? Okay, Karan is saying I will multiply the second equation by 2. Good thing, Karan. Paras will follow substitution value approach. Okay, good, Paras. That's a good approach. Rishikant says eliminate one of the variables. Aditya says use the value of one variable into another. Add the two equations. Solve second equation for x. Antonia, good. So see, I'm getting pretty good responses from everyone. Now, the easiest method is, probably most of the people will follow the same method, which is to equate the coefficient of x, because it is easier to equate. So most of you will multiply the second equation by 2. Okay? These are simultaneous equations. So you'll multiply the second equation by 2, and you will then simply eliminate x from the two equations by subtracting those two equations. And by doing that, you will have the value of y. Okay, so once you have the value of y, you will simply substitute the value of y in the first equation or the second equation to get the value of x. Okay, this is what I mean by the right method. You follow these 3 steps on any single question on linear equations, linear simultaneous equations. You will always get to the right answer in the fastest possible manner. Most consistent method is this one. Okay, now the reason I took up this question is probably this is something which all of us have done in school, and we have learned it really well. When you are learning this approach, probably you would have taken a lot of time in school, but it's so well ingrained in your thoughts now that you don't even have to think twice about it. It comes automatically. The responses were coming on like anything on the chat here. Everyone was saying the same thing. So we have learned this method really well for quant in the school for these equations. But what about other things? What about DS? What about verbal? What about SC, CR, RC? What about other things? Do we know the right approach for them? Let's understand. Let me ask you a simple question. How do you approach RC today? Okay, and I know some of you would have attended our webinar last week. And Bhuvneshwar, that's a good question. Can we have any sample of this method in verbal section as well? So Bhuvneshwar, I'm going to talk about that. Don't worry, I've got you covered. Most of your questions, I'm going to answer that. So we'll talk about that in a bit now. So let me talk about RC. Take an example of it. And I'm going to ask you a question around what is the approach that you follow for RC. So first of all, let me tell you the most popular approaches which are out there in the industry, like what the most popular approach that students follow. The first approach is read the first line and last line of every paragraph and jump to questions. This is something which I've seen even very renowned teachers teach, teachers who have scored 757, 77, 80 as well. You just read the first line of the paragraph, every paragraph, last line of the paragraph, jump to the question, see what the question is asking you, go back to that relevant paragraph and answer it. And some people even go to the extent of saying that you don't even need to read the paragraph. First and last lines are enough. That's more than enough for you to answer every question. Second approach, second more popular approach, and probably this is the most popular one. Read the passage quickly in 2 minutes, because at the end of the day it's all about time saving, right, on the GMAT. So you have to answer questions quickly. So save time by reading the passage. Read it quickly, take a mental note of what lies where, and refer back to the passage for every question. Okay, that's the second most popular approach. The third approach is read the questions first so you know what you're looking for, and then go back to the passage and take out the right piece of information from the passage so that you can save time. So let me ask you this. What is the approach that you guys follow to solve RC questions? Okay. Let me ask you this very quickly. What is the approach that you follow for solving RC questions today? Okay. I'll wait for 30 seconds for you guys to respond to this poll. Look at this approaches. See what is the approach that you are following and respond in the poll accordingly. All right, so I have the responses with me. Now I'm going to end the poll in 5 seconds. If anyone is yet to respond, please respond. Okay, cool. So you can see the results. Half of the batch, almost half of the batch, actually connects with approach 2, and that's I was even telling you this is the most popular approach that students follow. In fact, when I was a student, when I was preparing for RC for the first time, this is the first approach that I tried working on. My idea was simple. For a passage, to me, was like a map. I just need to understand what lies where and then come back for every question to the passage. The problem with this approach is multifold. First problem, you spend additional time for every single question. You have to read multiple times. That's the first problem. You spend extra time. Second problem is your understanding of the passage is not great. All you know is what lies where. What you don't know is why does it lie there? What is the role that is playing over there? And trust me, 80 to 85% questions, this is a research which I have done independently on the OG questions, 80 to 85% questions in RC are inference based, and inference based questions are not going to be directly mentioned in the passage. You have to draw the inferences by reading between the lines. So the second approach does not work. I have put in a lot of effort on doing that. My scores were always fluctuating. I was always confused between two choices, and I was never really sure about why I'm marking a particular answer. Okay, so second approach did not work for me. Third approach, probably slightly more beneficial, but for GMAT, as Bhavika is saying, you can't see the next question on GMAT. So third approach probably doesn't make sense for GMAT style questions because you have to answer every question. Approach 1, a big no. Approach 1 works only for people who are already very good at RCs. So if you are really good, you are scoring 90-95% in RC passages, you can probably try approach 1, because then you, even by reading the first and the last line, you'll be able to understand what the passage is talking about. So approach 1 is the last recommended thing. So none of these approaches worked for me. None of these approaches work for regular students. All these approaches work on one simple principle, that is to save time. Okay, they are based on shortcuts and not based on understanding the purpose of the passage. What you need to understand is GMAT is testing you on RC because it wants to filter out students who can basically understand case studies really well, who can identify the main point, understand the information, and identify the crux. So unless you have that skill, you are going to get stuck in RC passages. Okay, so it is very important that you focus on the meaning, and that's why I am happy to see some of the people mentioning that in the comments over here, that they read the passage properly in the first go itself. And that is something which we also covered in the last week's webinar that we had on RC. So I'm going to talk about that in a while, but let me give you a parallel of using one of these approaches for quant. So imagine that you were applying shortcuts on Quant as well. So for example, let's take the question that we solved earlier. Okay, so instead of solving it in the methodical way, what you tried to do was, instead of doing that, what you could have tried is, you could have tried putting in x as 1, okay, randomly. Okay, let's take x as 1. You have tried it, but you will find that from equation 1 you are getting y as 6, which is not satisfying the other equation. You could have also tried putting x as 2 in the second step, but you will still not get the answer. What I mean to say is, if you try to apply shortcuts, you won't get to the answer fast, and you won't even get high accuracy. It's always much better to rely on methodical approaches to get a better accuracy as well as faster output. So for both the things, it is much better. But the only thing with methodical approach is, it takes a lot of pain to learn the approach, and it takes time initially. Okay, I'm going to talk about that as well in a bit. So the focus on learning the methodical approach. For example, in RC, we advocate the involved and evolved reading approach, where we say that you have to think like an author. You have to understand the author's point of view by immersing yourself in the passage. Read every line, try to understand the meaning of each line by breaking it into smaller chunks. Okay. Then for every subsequent sentence, you should keep relating back to the previous sentence. Try to see how does it change the meaning, how does it take the information and thought process forward. Okay. And try to ask yourself, what is the author trying to tell you? And you can use transition words and conjunctions to relate back. So if you see a word like however, but, therefore, you can obviously make your life easy and relate back to the information provided earlier well. And then your goal in the end should be to having a summary of every paragraph from the perspective of what is the purpose of this paragraph, not what is written in the paragraph. What is the purpose of this paragraph? So think of it like a mini main point question for each para. So if you focus on developing the right approach, you will always get questions right with high accuracy. And that's why just solving questions is not enough. Okay, if you just solve questions, you will be probably repeating the same mistakes. What you need to do is, in between, you have to learn the right skills. And then when you solve extra questions, you basically get to a high score. You get successful. Okay. Now, how do you do that? I'm sure a lot of you would be thinking, how do you do that? So even if you know the approach, I told you about the involved and evolved reading approach. If you try to relate it and try to apply it in a question yourself, I'm sure you will do your 100%, you will do a good job. But the problem with applying it yourself without any references, that you will think that you have got the meaning right, because just because you're reading, you're trying to read it properly, understand it properly. But even then, you may not have understood it properly, and you might make mistakes. Okay, so it is important for you to have solutions of every question that you solve being written with the same approach. The solution should always speak the same language. Okay, because if you have the solution in this following the same approach, then right after solving your question, you can actually look at the solution step by step, see what are the variances that exist. Or if you are able to do exactly the same thing, you can actually note down that, okay, I was able to understand the first sentence really well, but I made a mistake in the understanding of the second sentence and how it was related to it. So if you have a solution that speaks the same language, it becomes much more easy for you to master the approach. Okay, without the right solutions, you will not be able to do that. And that's one of the biggest problems that students face, especially those who learn from books, because books just tell you that, okay, option B is right, A is wrong, C is wrong, D is wrong, E is wrong for these reasons. But they don't follow a methodical approach in most of the cases. That, okay, how do you go about analyzing the passage or the argument or the sentence for that matter? How do you understand that? What is the meaning, exact meaning of it? And unless you have the right reference, you will struggle to follow this approach. And that's why we make sure that at GMAT Viz, your typical learning curve is not just learning concepts and practicing questions. We have created a file in between them for teaching your application, something which we call as a concept booster. So after every video lesson, when you go through the GMAT Quiz course, even in the free trial, you can get access to some of the files and see how we take you through it. I constantly tell my students that video lessons are just concepts, anyone can teach you concepts. But the most important part of our course is Concept Booster. What we have done is to help you learn more effectively. We have done enough research on every topic. For example, if it is on main point, we have done enough research and asked ourselves, looked at the OG questions and seen that exactly what are the various varieties that are tested on that particular topic. For example, in prime numbers, we found out that there are 10 ways in which a concept can be tested. So in the concept booster, we give you one question of each type so that you are ready and you learn to apply the concept in each of those question types. And we don't give you this as in form of a quiz where you solve all 10 questions at once and then we show you the solution. We give you one question at once. You solve the question, you see the solution right away. Okay. And the reason why we do that is very simple. Since you have solved the question just now, you know exactly how you went about solving it. So when you are reviewing the solution, you can actually note down the variances. You can actually understand the differences in your approach and the approach that you should follow. And once you know all that, you can take that learning forward to the next question. Do the same thing over there. Generate some learning from the next question. Do the same thing on the third question. So the idea is we equip you with highly detailed, standardized questions which are GMAT style in the concept boosters to teach you the methods. And then finally, when you move to the practice questions, you take a proper quiz and you evaluate yourself. Okay. And we have the right methods to solve all various question types. We teach you the meaning based approach for SC. We teach you the pre-thinking approach for CR. We teach you the involved and evolved reading approach for RC. For DS, we follow the method of drawing inferences, and PS we have a 3-step process. And the good thing is all these methods, a part of it is shared in the free trial, so you can check out the free trial, see for yourself how is that we are teaching you things. There are some files which are very basic and we have kept them intentionally in the free trial to help you learn the methods, and there are some files which are intermediate and advanced, so you can go through it, understand what are the right methods to solve, and when you are preparing you should make sure that you are following these methods and not relying on shortcuts to solve questions. Okay, so this is the second part of your learning. So we discussed about the planning part, we discussed about the execution. The most important part in execution is learning the concepts followed by learning the application of those concepts. Okay, so let us now move to the third part, which is the assessment stage. Okay, but before I move, let me ask you a question, and it has been quite some time which I haven't asked you a question. So let me ask you a question. Are you clear with the execution part? Quick yes, no, guys. Are you clear with the strategy in the execution part? Quick yes, no. I'll wait for 15-20 seconds before I move on. Are you clear with the execution part over here? All right. Okay, so I have a good number of responses. I see mostly everyone is clear except a couple of you maybe. So if you have any questions, please feel free to write in the chat. I'll be happy to take them up. All right, so let's move to the assessing phase. So what should be done in the assessment stage? So first of all, the assessment stage has to be divided into two parts. One is has to be done in two parts rather. One is during your learning. So when I say learning, what I mean is when you're learning the basic concepts, application, and going through the basic modules for the first time. That is the learning phase. Okay. And then at this stage, you should focus on learning the right method. Once you have learned, and you move to the fine-tuning phase, where you are basically you are focusing on your weak areas and doing all the prep, the mock test, and all those things. And that is the phase where you should focus on the timing. Okay, so I'll talk about mock test. I have a question from Rohit. Rohit, I'll definitely talk about that question. Don't worry. So you're asking how much time being spent on a question should I, after spending how much time should I skip a question? So I'll talk about that. Don't worry about that, Rohit. So Pedro, the slides will be available later. I'll share the slides with you at the end of the session. Don't worry about that. And recording will also be shared with people who have registered for the webinar. So don't worry about that. focus on understanding each aspect right now and ask your questions if you have any. Okay. So what I wanted to say over here was that in assessment phase, you should do it in two stages. One is during your learning, second is during your fine tuning. Okay. During your learning, during the fine tuning phase, your focus should be. So what I mean to say is during the learning phase, you should not assess yourself from the point of view of how long are you taking to solve a question. That should not be the concern at all. And there is a very, very important reason why I'm talking about it. Because when I ask students what is the biggest trouble that they are having, more often than not, they tell me that okay, they are not able to solve questions under the allotted time. Okay, and I'm not going to ask a poll on this, but I'm sure if I ask you guys as well, most of you will tell me the same thing. That's why I'm not able to solve questions in under 2 minutes. What's the problem? Okay, what the problem is not that you're not able to solve questions under 2 minutes. That's just a symptom. Okay, it's not the disease. The problem is you're not learning the right method to solve questions. Okay, and let me talk about this at length. What happens when you're learning? Most of the people, what they start doing is they start worrying about timing too soon. If I'm using the involved and evolved reading approach, it is obvious that initially I will take more time. There is no way that I can understand the complete meaning of the passage, relate back every sentence, and still read the passage in 2 or 3 minutes. Initially, you will take 10 minutes maybe, or 8 minutes, or 6 minutes, depending on your reading speed. But what is more important is you don't worry about timing at that moment. You should worry about understanding. That's the most important thing. And that's a natural learning process for anything that you do in your life. Whether it is driving a bike, whether it is swimming, anything. Initially, it will take you extra time to learn the right skills. But if you start worrying about timing too soon, you will shift your focus away from learning. Your focus will be just about saving time. Okay, and what happens then? You will shift away from the right method, and your score in the end is going to stagnate around 600, 650. Okay, and that's one of the biggest difference between a successful and an unsuccessful student. A successful student understands that I'm I'm taking today. I want you to be very, very clear with this. Unless you do this, you're not going to learn the right method for sure. Okay, that's the most important tip I give my students after telling them that you have to learn the methods. Okay, so my tip is very simple. In your learning phase, okay, so Sunand, I think my voice would have not would have been a problem for some time, but I think it should be better now. So there was some signal issue, but I can see the signal stabilizing at my end now. Okay, so I tell my students that in your learning phase, you should not focus on your accuracy. Even if you are getting questions right, you should make sure that you are getting questions right for the right reason. Okay, so if you get a question right, even then go through the solution clearly, read every single line, make sure that you understood the method really well and you applied the same method to solve questions. If you are not doing that, you are not learning the method and you will falter later on. So it is a very important recommendation. And I know as a student, I have had a tendency of skipping the solution for the questions that I get right, because I feel I got it right. So I would have obviously known what it is. But remember, sometimes you get it right because even if you overlook certain things, but it is important to learn from every single question that you solve. So don't time yourself, try to learn the right methods, use the right methods. And the second thing that you should do in your assessment phase is you should master each topic before moving on, because this is again another thing which students don't do. what they do is they kind of go linearly. Okay, they have a schedule in mind that, okay, I have to complete topic 1, then topic 2, then topic 3, and then topic 4. They don't really stop after every question, after every topic, and they don't really assess their performance over there. And in by doing that, what they're basically doing is, if their understanding is not really good or the basic or for foundation concepts, and they keep on moving on to the section, if you don't understand the meaning well, if you're not able to do well on the you will not be able to do well on the advanced topics. Similarly, in CR, if you're not doing well on inference questions, you will struggle to understand the scope of the argument, and you will struggle to understand the question completely. Okay, so I have another student saying that the voice is can you guys hear me clearly? Quick yes, no. Let me pull the poll over here. Okay, can you guys hear me loud and clear? Is my voice clear to all of you? Yes, no? Okay, I see that there is some issue. So give me a second, guys. Let me try to change my network, and let's see if that works better. Okay, just give me a moment, guys. So give me a moment, guys. So I think my network has switched. So let me reset this poll now. Let me reset this poll now, and let me ask you now. Can you hear me now or not? Is my voice better now? Quickly, is my voice better now? Can you hear me clearly now? Please respond to this poll if my voice is clear now. I just switched to a different network. It's showing me 75 Mbps, so it should be good. I think it should be good now. Okay, great. So let me end this poll, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna repeat this part. Okay, I'm gonna repeat this part of mastering one topic before moving on. Okay, so what I was telling you was that if you what most of the students do is they try to do one topic really well. Uh, when I say really well, they try to complete everything that they have on the topic, and then they move to the second topic, and then to the third topic, and so on. What they fail to do is they do not assess their performance in the first topic to understand what are the gaps that exist, and they continue moving on with those gaps. And in most of the cases, when they even try to assess the gaps, they are not equipped enough, because obviously, like as a student, you only know so much about a particular thing. So sometimes even if you're trying to assess your performance, you get stuck. But if you move on to advanced topics before doing well on the basic topics, what will happen is you will struggle in the advanced ones. You will think that you are struggling because you don't know the advanced topic, but the problem lies elsewhere. And this is equally important for quant and verbal. For example, if you do not understand CR inference questions really well, you will not understand the conclusion, you will not understand the scope of the argument, and it will create trouble for you even in assumptions. So it is very important that right after every topic that you do, you take a topic quiz to find out your strengths. If you find out some weaknesses, you should focus on the weak parts right then and there. Okay, get rid of them right then and there, and then move on to the advanced parts. Okay, so you should identify the conceptual gaps from the topic, and without the right means or tools, you will definitely struggle, and issues will keep on piling up. So that's where GMAT quiz also comes into picture. So we understood that this problem exists, and this is one of the unique solutions that we have provided, and no other course does this for you. What we do is, at the end of every topic that you take, for example, if you see on the screen, you can see the various modules which are there for prime numbers. Okay, again, this is just a small part of the whole prime numbers things. You can see that it is ending with a practice quiz. So what happens at the end of every practice quiz, which is the end of every topic, is the performance assessment engine of our platform, which is driven by AI, will look at your performance in the quiz on various aspects, on various different parameters. And based on your performance, it will identify what are the things that you are good at and what are the things that you're not good at. If you're not good at something, it will automatically identify video lessons which cover those weak areas for you. So you don't need to worry about what you are good at and bad at, because in most cases you will not be able to identify that. The platform will do that for you. Okay, it will identify the video lessons. It will also identify some questions which test the same concept. And all you have to do is you have to enable this toggle on your screen and click on the button next activity. If you enable this toggle and click on the next activity button, okay, it will automatically get added to your course. So I'm going to click on this, show you that right now. So if you click on that, you will see that after the practice quiz, there are some additional files which have been added to the course. And this is how we believe that students can actually improve their performance, by making sure that they're able to identify the gaps right then and there. And that's why we say that we give you real-time improvement modules, and that's one of the biggest reasons why our students have been so successful in the past. Okay, so that's one way of assessing yourself. Now, once you have done the assessment, you are moving to the last stage of your learning, which is the optimizing stage. Okay, now what you need to do is, after that you are done with each module, okay, so let's say you're done with sentence correction, you should take 1 or 2 quizzes which is consisting of 15 to 30 questions, and you should identify your weak areas. Weak areas are areas where you have less than 60 or 70% score, so you can keep that as a benchmark, and then optimize those weak areas by focusing on improving them. Now, how do you improve them? The best way to do that is, you revise the concepts first, go through the concepts again. If you are getting less than 60% score, it means there are some conceptual gaps. Then solve and review questions. Again, I'm not asking you to solve tons of questions, because that's not something that is just by doing that you are going to improve your score. You have to review every question. You have to focus on learning the application, review the solution, and that's how you learn from it. Okay, and this is something which I time and again ask my students to do. So take a module wise test, identify the weak areas, start working on weak areas by focusing on these 3 steps. And once you do that, you should be able to move to the last stage, where you start taking up sectional tests. So there were few questions about mock tests. When should you take the mock test? So let me talk about that now. So even before you take mock tests, once you're done with the individual sections like quant and verbal, you should practice sectional tests. See, mock tests are important, but it's not like you have to take 15, 20, 30 mocks before the GMAT. Okay, you mock should be taken from a perspective of building stamina for the test, to understand the right test taking strategies. But for improvement and assessment, you should take up sectional tests, because if you are taking up a sectional test, you are able to focus more on a particular area. Okay, you're not spending time on everything at once, you're focusing more on particular area, and you're doing precision targeting. You're targeting things very precisely, weak areas very precisely, and you're doing well on them. So after you do well on the sectional test, you take up and identify the problems that exist, then you should move to the mock test phase, where you should take up 4 to 5 mocks. Okay, overall even 4 to 5 mocks are good enough. And during the mock test, it is very important that you learn the right test taking strategy by understanding the algorithm. So I covered the algorithm at a very high level today, but you need to make sure that you understand the right parameters for the algorithm, to understand when you should take like for which questions are the most important, and how you should go about the strategy. Okay, so that's a discussion, a lengthy discussion. Again, I'm not gonna do that today, but I will be more than happy to take up your questions around mocks and test taking strategy. So I'll answer the questions which were there. So this is how you do the optimizing stage, and that's all. So that's what you need to do in order to improve your scores on the GMAT. Okay, so with that, I have completed the second part of the webinar. I shared all the thought processes that I had around how to improve your score. If you have any questions, I'm opening this part to the open-ended Q&A. Please feel free to post your questions now. I'll be more than happy to take them up. Please post them in the chat pod. You can always get in touch with me directly if you want to. My email ID is listed over here. So my email ID is piyush@gmatviz.com, and you have my contact number over here as well. You can always get in touch with me on this number. This is my personal number. So even after the webinar, if you have any questions in your mind,